Hey, what's going on, everybody? Sorry about that. A couple of minutes behind schedule, apparently. Hey, I'm John. Hopefully you're doing well. Today is going to be a relatively easy show, mostly because we've done a studio tour before, but things keep kind of evolving little by little, and so the point of this is just to kind of bring up to speed on my show what it is that I'm doing up here, apart from this show. So let's jump in here. I don't see anything in the chat yet, so that's fine. It's kind of a slow morning. We have my brother from Toronto is visiting, so that's been good. We picked him up yesterday from the airport, and now we are hanging out with him. He's playing Minecraft with my son right now, so that's been an interesting experience for him. But yeah, it's been a busy week. Just a quick little recap on what day was it? Thursday after last week's show. We got in the car and we drove to Central Ohio, which is about 7 hours from here. So we drove all the way directly to Wapakoneta, if you know where that is. And it's on I-75, kind of in the middle of the state. And in Wapak, we just went to a hotel, and that was fine. Crashed there for the night, so that we were there like 9:30 or something like that. The next day, we went over to my in-laws, who live kind of east of that. and hung out with them for the day, for Friday. Did a bunch of stuff, walked around, went to the beach. They actually live on a lake, so that was kind of nice. And we were able to see them. And then stayed at the hotel Friday night, back to their place on Saturday, checked out of the hotel on Saturday. And we went swimming on Friday night at the hotel, which there was nobody there except like one other group of people that came in late when we were basically leaving. But then on Saturday, checked out of the hotel and stayed at my in-laws for the day. And then that night at about 10 o'clock, we watched fireworks. And then after that, we got in the car and drove back to Nashville through the night. And so we got back, actually, so many of you know that the studio that we shoot our Sunday morning stuff at is actually at somebody's house. It's in a soundstage in their basement, which basements are very rare in Tennessee because it's all rock. So they actually have a lower level. Everything's built on a hill. So they have a lower level, and down there is a place where we have our soundstage. And so we drove to back to Nashville, back to Brentwood, and crashed at their place. We just asked them if we could come directly there. They were super nice. They had beds for us. They made us breakfast in the morning. It was wild. So we got in at about 5 o'clock that next morning, Sunday morning. I slept for 2 hours and 15 minutes very quickly, as quick as I could. And then we went and did Sunday morning. We didn't necessarily, so after every service, on Sunday, usually the group that's there goes out to lunch and just on our own. But we did not join them for lunch because my son wasn't feeling great. No wonder. And I was very tired. So then I came home on Sunday and I slept for 5 hours and then went back to bed at about 10 o'clock that night and slept for another 8 hours and woke up on Monday feeling good. So it's been a regular week here, apart from my brother visiting. It's been a really regular week, and I'm working through the regular routine, which hasn't happened in 3 weeks. So it's been kind of nice. It's been kind of nice to be on schedule here, other than my delay, but I had good reason for being late. I was making coffee. So coffee is here. I have my little beef snack stick. We're going to have that as well, and kind of go on from there. Now, I see over on YouTube, I see Zach is talking, and so I'm going to turn on the YouTube. I don't know why my socials didn't turn on here. There they are. All right, so we will, now we can pull these up and show them. Hey, morning, John. Just saying hi and bye at the same time. It's been a busy day here at Fred Hutch. Lots of events going on. It's the 50th year of the Hutch today, so we party for that and other groups. Awesome. 3 PA system set up today, 2 in a courtyard and 1 on the rooftop looking out over the water. Yeah, my day is busy. Only tech on site today too. Yikes. Good luck today, Zach. That sounds like a lot. What's going on, Angus? Good morning. Good to see you. Yeah, that sounds like a lot, man. Good luck with all that. And yeah, steady on. The end will come eventually, just one foot in front of the other. Yeah, it's weird because, like, you know, even myself, we have these busy seasons in our jobs, in our lives, all that sort of stuff. And so right now I'm not in a busy season. I actually just came out of the whole vacation season, but that can be busy in and of itself, right? Like when we go on vacation, as we say, when my family and I go on vacation, it's more of an adventure. It's more of like work to go and do something different, parenting in a different zip code, as we say. But yeah, it's not necessarily putting our feet up on a cruise ship and watching the world go by. It's the trip that we took to Virginia. So we went to Toronto, and that was like we went into the city. We, visited with family. We again parented in a different country, and then came home. And then we went to Virginia, and so we were parenting all the way out from Tennessee to Virginia to the coast and back. And we went to Williamsburg, we went to Gatlinburg, we went to the Great Smoky Mountains, we went to Shenandoah. So we weren't like just not doing anything. We did go to the beach one day, but that was the first time my kids have ever swam in the ocean. And so that was work and exciting. And I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. I'm just saying it wasn't like sipping Mai Tais or anything. And then last week traveling to Ohio, so we drove through the day on Thursday and hotels and visiting in-laws and fireworks. And my mother-in-law runs a quite successful, actually, flower farm. And I've added her to Apple Maps and Google Maps. And so if you look up Ivy Gate, all one word, Ivygate, Ivy Gate Flower Farm in Ohio, it should come up in Lakeview. Anyway, she runs a rather successful flower farm, and so we were kind of helping with that, and the kids wanted to be involved and wanted to help sell flowers and whatever. So it's not vacation. It's just a change of venue. Oh, and by the way, we still got to get our jobs done, right? So we're taking time, but we're still making it all work. Let's just say Sunday service. Thankfully, I had a full crew on Sunday morning because I was functioning at about 50%. So they made it go pretty well, and I only screwed up one thing, and it was something I had screwed up earlier in the week. So it was not a big deal. But yeah, we have had our fair share of work. Hey, Angus says, "Hey, take care, Zach." That's a lot for one person. And Zach says, "Well, I'm out." Good luck, buddy. We'll see you another week. All right. So yeah, it has been a busy week, and it's been a busy 3 weeks, and we're back to like regular schedule right now, which is great because I could use a couple of weeks of normality. Now, the next time I'm away is going to be the end of the month, July. Where's my calendar here? All right. So it is going to be July 31st. There will not be a show. So we'll do 2 more weeks, and then there won't be a show. That is the trip that I'm traveling up to Northern Ontario to direct my summer camp. I don't really even direct it anymore. I mean, I say I do, but I feel kind of sheepish doing that because we delegate all the jobs out to other guys that are in Ontario, and then I just make sure the communication is happening and that the things are purchased. But it's not really a directing job at this point. It's more of just delegating of work and then hoping it all gets done. So I'm traveling on the 30th. I will leave Tennessee and travel up to Troy, Ohio, stay for the night somewhere in that area, and then travel on to Waterloo, Ontario. What did I say? Troy, Ontario? Ohio. Troy, Ohio, then Waterloo, Ontario. And then on that Friday, so Wednesday to Troy, Thursday to Waterloo, Friday to North Bay, and then Temagami, which is where we go camping. So it will be over 1,000 miles, and it'll be 17 hours of driving by the time I'm done. We have to make a stop in Brampton, which is where my parents live, so that's just west of Toronto. But I will go pick up my friend Scott in Waterloo, stay at his place for the night, and then go on to Brampton, pick up my dad, and then go on to North Bay, meet the rest of the crew there for lunch by 10:30. It's the plan on Friday, which is really quick because to think that I'm going to be leaving Tennessee on Wednesday around lunch, and then 2 days later at lunch, I'll be in North Bay. That's a lot. That's a lot. Now, for driving wise, it's actually only 6 hours a day. So it's 6 hours from here to Troy, 6 hours from Troy to Waterloo, plus border time, and then 6 hours from Waterloo to North Bay with an extra little added thing there in for Brampton. So yes, it will be a drive, but it'll be great, and I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait. Matter of fact, I'm kind of tempted to take my kayak. I don't know. I'm sure I've shared this before a long time ago. Let's pull up a window. Oh, you know what? Oh. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. We will pull up the kayak here just because it's fun. But anyways, I'm tempted to take it because my roof rack is going to arrive. It has shipped. I ordered, and I'll give a full review of it because that's something I like to do with stuff that I find. But I ordered a roof rack that doesn't have to go through the doors of my truck. I have one that's just like you tie down with ratchet straps, but it whistles down the road because it opens the seals. And also, if it rains, the seals then leak. And so that's no good. So I actually found a roof rack for my kayak they're bars, and I got to buy a kayak actual, rack for it. But anyways, that will fit my truck. And I'm really hopeful that it's going to be a nice snug fit and be the answer to my problems, because I got 2 huge kayaks that I need to transport, and it'd be great if it worked. So I will pull this up. Now, I'll merge all this together here now, because we're talking about who on earth is that? We're talking about how my studio is set up and what I'm using it for. So currently this studio is primarily used for training videos. So I do training videos for, I work for an online congregation, and a lot of our volunteers are folks from home. They're people that tune in later in the week, or they tune in while we're live. And one of my functions is to generate training videos so that as we need volunteers to do things in their remote locations, I can demonstrate how it is that we do that. So that's primarily what this room is set up for. Now, I also do a live show once a week, and this is a convenient way for me to kind of iron out the problems. We've had lots of shows talking about audio, various microphones. I have a hat. I have a hat here that I took to NAB, where I wired a microphone into the brim of the hat, as if we recall. So there is a microphone right here. It's taped down with black tape. There you go. You can see it. But that microphone is a little X5 microphone. And if you have seen those videos on my YouTube channel of me giving updates about booths that we saw and things that we were considering for use at our soundstage, those videos, all the audio on there was recorded into a little body pack. This is the Zoom F1 field recorder, and it has a little microphone jack in the top. So I would have that microphone in my hat, run down, down my shirt. This was clipped onto my bag, and that microphone was plugged in there. When I exported the videos from my phone, which I just used that Flow Pro 2 that I got from Insta360, I exported those videos, put them into DaVinci, exported the audio from the SD card, put that into DaVinci, line up the waveforms. Was super easy, and then just exported. The audio quality was way better than I could get on my phone. So night and day difference as far as I'm concerned. And then in DaVinci, you can clean it up. You can take out some of the background noise, do some of that as well. So in the full version. So when I would do those training videos, that's kind of the idea. Is we have done multiple videos on audio. We've done, different experiments with the way things look, the way things sound. I have set up this whole scene, if you will, over the ages. We're going to get into the kind of the 3 major things: lighting, sound, and then video. And I'll talk through all that briefly here. But I'm also not going to spend 2 hours doing it. I'm going to try and consolidate it down. So that's what I'm primarily using this booth for, and this desk. And this is going to change in the next 12 months, because I'm going to actually move venues to a external garage that I'm in the process of building. And so I have paid the first installment for that. So hopefully that will begin before Christmas. Hopefully it'll be done before Christmas. Now, the building will be done before Christmas, but my studio will not. That's going to be another 6 to 12 months. So here we go. So let's kind of get into it. I'm just going to double check, make sure we're good on the chat. So I'm just want to, and I was going to bring up the kayak thing, and we will do that as a part of the explanation of how this studio is put together to do kind of training videos, to do live streams, to do all that. This is kind of how this is done. All right, so this is my old truck. All right, we'll go with that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how the studio is put together, and we're going to break it up into 3 sections. The first is lighting. What are we using for lighting? That has evolved over the ages. I used to actually use natural lighting off of windows when I was in my Clarkston home long ago when I started the whole bird dog support thing. I would have my windows open. That was kind of my direct light. And then I would have kind of some fill lights to help with a few. I had one light to help with that. But I eventually did buy a Elgato key light, which if I go back here to this computer, we have the control source for it, but it is, the key light, which is the larger one. It's like a flat panel LED light, and that's pretty good. It has a lot of variability to it. It gives you a pretty good range if you're live streaming. Gives you the ability basically to have that bright side of your face, right? So that it's probably a little too bright in this shot. But anyways, gives you that contrast between the shadow and the bright side. So your first key light is going to be over here, and I'm looking into the shadows. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm looking into the shadow of that, and the cameras look kind of hitting that shadow side of my face the majority, which gives a sense of depth when you don't have a hair light and a whole bunch of other things providing, depth perception. Also, my seat is pretty close to the back wall, and so there's not really a way to get my camera to give a focal length that blurs out the background, because I would need to be a lot closer, and I could be a lot closer, but then I'd be off center to my computer, and that doesn't really work for like me actually doing the show. So instead, the background is kind of in focus. It's a little in focus. You can see my hand's a little blurry, but it's just enough. You can see the edge of the computer, which is showing the YouTube studio and a few other things. But this is kind of what I've settled on over the years, mostly because I can also then have my microphone right here, and it can be in front of me while I'm working, and then I can move it off to the side when I'm not on a show. So for training videos and that sort of thing, this is the way that I've got it set up for lighting. So I have my key light here, and then I do have a fill light that is the Elgato Mini, and I decided to get, although I don't really care about the Elgato brand, I'm not sponsored by them, unfortunately, and I'm not really married to it, but the reason I wanted it is because when I'm programming the lights to turn on and off, I want to be able to hit one button and turn them on and off via Companion. And so Companion has an Elgato module which allows you to talk to the lights, and so I can send it the on-off command, which also means that as I'm setting up my pre-show command to auto-start the show, so when the countdown runs out and I'm supposed to be sitting here on time, unlike today, I can hit Start Show, and it will turn on the lights, it will transition to Cam 1, and it will turn on my microphone all in one button. And so it's all timed, and it works out well. So I hit the Start Show, I say, hey, everybody, thanks for coming along, and then my face shows up, my microphone's already on, it all happens at the same time. Well, that is convenient to have that programmability inside of one button. I can also turn the lights on and off with a single button. I also have status lights for these two lights. So if they're connected via Wi-Fi, which I could talk about the pros and cons of that, but maybe I'll do that on a product review. But I actually have status lights telling me if they are feeding back on the Wi-Fi. So if they disappear off the network, those buttons turn red. And if I can see those lights, those buttons turn green. So there's an easy way for me to know, oh, I've got a wireless issue with one of the lights, and I can restart the light and get it reconnected. It's a whole different world now with the audio tools in Resolve, is what I guess when we're talking about doing audio. I used to record concerts on HDV cameras. Oh my goodness. Every time the tape would flutter from high sound levels, there'd be about a 2-second dropout. Manually aligning clips from 3 to 4 cameras was great practice, especially when the capture software wouldn't detect the dropouts, and one camera would suddenly go out of sync mid-clip. Nightmares. Yeah, that sounds like a total nightmare. Yes, I do remember actually doing video on those styles of cameras and tapes and all that stuff. That's where I kind of fell in love with it, honestly, and now it's so much easier. There's actually really no excuse for not doing more video stuff because it's so easy. It's all digital and it's easy to cut. I can literally create a training video and have it up on YouTube in like 30 minutes from time of recording, depending on how particular you are about the final product. But if I'm happy with the way that I presented it, and you can record all of your outputs, you can record just your main output, whatever you want to do, especially in vMix, It's very convenient. Not to mention having to capture every tape in real time. Oh man, yeah, I remember that. I first learned about that in high school. They were doing like my ninth grade. They showed us the editing suite for theatrical productions that the high school was doing, and they were editing and putting in like swipes and zooms. Everything was done in real time. It was crazy. And I'm so happy I don't live back then anymore because this is way better and way easier. So, all right. So lighting is through the Elgato brand, and I have a full key light, and then I have a mini, which is good. Now, one addition that I changed to the mini is I was watching a guy out of Toronto who was talking about documentaries that he filmed, and he bought a fabric that, I'm going to have to do it up here too. Let me go back. Sorry, I'm going to have to get used to this new little workflow I changed today, actually. So today's a bit of an experiment. All right, so I bought a little piece of fabric that basically allows me to soften the light, because I find that the fill from the mini was a little harsh, and it was causing some serious light. Well, and you can even see the harshness of the light here on my skin tones, because that one doesn't have a piece of fabric. But what is this called? Let me Google it real quick. Okay, so this is just a little piece of diffusion fabric, basically, is what it's called. And all I've done is I've just folded it over a couple of times and folded it over the light so that it gives it a fair bit more diffusion than what it already had. Elgato claims that, their filters in front will diffuse it for you. But because of the way that I've set up my camera, my lights are actually pretty bright, and that gives me the luxury of closing down the f-stop and not having to necessarily drive the camera very hard. And so it makes, my black hat look really black on camera, which is, I've liked that look ever since I started doing stuff in Bird Dog. I don't like the, if you have to open the ISO way up. I don't like it if the f-stop's way high. I don't like it if, the shutter frame rate has to be super low. I prefer that I have a high frame rate. Matter of fact, I try and run it at 60 frames on the camera, and then I prefer a very low ISO and to be able to use that f-stop as best I can, which means that you actually need a lot more light than you're comfortable with. And people who are not used to that, especially people on stage or whatever, when you turn the lights on and it's all very bright, they're like, whoa, it's so bright. It's like, well, it's actually because the cameras require a lot of light. And it's something I used to say at Bird Dog all the time, is like, cameras love light. So give them a lot of light, more than you think you're going to need, because then you have full control of those colors and things really look quite nice. You're not, it's not like a grayed out. It doesn't feel almost like, it's hard to say, but it almost feels like the blacks are not true black. They don't really look dark. They look kind of washed out, almost grayish, and you get busyness in those dark colors on your frame. So my lights are turned up actually fairly bright, and then it gives me the luxury of kind of turning down the camera lens and the settings on there. But even with that, it was then providing some pretty harshness, like skin tones. And so on the fill light, it's pretty bright, but I have then a diffusion kind of blanket over it, and that just is bunched up on there. And that gives me the right amount of depth, I think, that this frame needs when I'm talking into the camera, right? So it's actually pretty bright on one side, and then it's got the shadows on another, but you can still see my face, and then the reflection of the color off of the wall kind of fills in the extra little bits that that I think need to have some definition. And so it gives it that proper like depth that I'm going for, and that's all kind of intentional. Now, you might remember, if you were along for the ride many years ago, when I was doing Bird Dog stuff, I actually had fill lights that were color. So I had green and blue under my desk, and they would kind of shine up and provide like a two-tone look, and then I had a white light on the front. I actually kind of liked that look. I didn't mind it at all, but I eventually moved away from it because we were doing things in 4K, and the P4K was one of my cameras, and I just I ended up having to move around away from it. So I ended up washing the back wall with actually these lights. These were mine, these RGBs. So I started washing the back wall with color and then doing proper 3-point lighting. I even had a hair light when I was at Bird Dog. All right, so let me go back. Oh, so yes, so this light, if I want to just show you that, oh, come on, the diffusion blanket that I was using from Amazon. Ooh, it's a Prime Day deal. Happy Prime Day, everybody. Prime Week. You know, just like Black Friday used to be a Friday, and now it's like 2 weeks long or a month. So silly. So if we wanted to just share this with you, here is that diffusion sheet that I'm using, 60 inches, and it is great. It works really well. It's inexpensive. It's only like $20 at regular price, or it's right now it's on sale. But it's just a sheet, and I just folded it a couple of times and hung it over the light, and that works really well. Now, if I was pro, I'd get a clamp it on there, but you know, I'm not a pro, so evidently that's just the reality of things. So yes, so that little diffusion sheet works really well, and I like it. And that's my entire lighting setup. I have these RGB floor lights, which are here. I don't know if I have. They're just cheap ones, though. They do have an app, which is pretty. It's okay, I guess. It's not amazing. But the little floor lights are just outdoor rated, IP66. Yeah, IP66 rated, which means that they'll kind of put up with the weather. But they're indoor. They have their own heat sinks on them. They don't get very hot, and so they just sit on the ground. And that's all I do to provide lighting behind me. And I try and keep them pointed away from me at this point so that they shine up on the wall and give some dynamics. This is actually a 45-degree like roof, and so you do get this kind of defined line, which helps me, I guess, with the horizon a little bit. But it also provides 2 different color tones behind me, so that's a convenient mistake. Yeah, so all good there. So that's pretty much it for lighting for my studio for now. The good old DV revolution days, yes. That was a great time to start a career in video. Hey, diffusion is useful. I agree. It is very useful. I'm tempted to put diffusion on that one too, but I don't know if I'm going to go that far to it just yet. What's the black fuzzy stuff to the left of the frame? Okay, so that is actually my network rack is what that is. So this right here. Well, I'll talk about camera placement in a second, but that is my network rack. So I have a cabinet, and then I have a network rack that sits on top of that runs a lot of my audio equipment, and it runs this computer that you're watching, this camera, NDI generation. It's coming through, it's mounted to that rack as well, but it's above it. So this is actually just the square network rack holes that you're seeing, and I can move it a little bit this way, but then you're going to see more garbage. So it's just the way the frame. I figure, like, well, with the computer screens on this side and everything, it's like gives you a sense of something. But maybe it's just sense of busyness. It's true. When the same amount of light comes from all around instead of a single point, people have way less problems with it. It's not even about brightness. You can get people to squint just looking at a computer screen showing a picture of a bright point of light on a dark background. Agreed. And you have to one thing I have found as especially working with churches who don't do video stuff, but when I was at Bird Dog, I was constantly saying things like, yeah, you're going to have to train your people on stage what it means to do proper video. And there was this dynamic about, well, we don't want to change anything about what's happening in the service. We just want to add video. It's like, well, I understand, but it doesn't work that way. Like starting to do production level. And they would always say, like, it just doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very good on TV, or it doesn't look very good on my phone. Well, yeah, it's because you're not in a production suite. And what you're used to seeing on news and all that is like a production suite. And first of all, you don't have a crew, you don't have a budget, and you bought 2 Bird Dog cameras and you put them in the back of the room and you're expecting it to look like a broadcast. Well, you don't have any lights. You don't have, any proper depth of field. The cameras are usually right up front, like they're right there next to the talent, providing that depth. And so I had a lot of conversations with people who were just clueless about how video production really works. And I guess they were thinking, I'm going to spend $4,000, $5,000 on 2 cameras, and it's going to look like a TV production. And that's just not true. That's not how that works. You need to think about the 3 or 4 elements if you're including presentation, but you need to think about at least the 3 elements: lighting, sound, and video in order. Video and the presentation thing can kind of go together, but we can talk about that in a second. But yeah, you have to think and invest in each of those 3 elements. How am I going to get the stage lit? How am I going to get the talent's audio to the production suite? And then how am I going to capture all of this? And that's 3 separate worlds. And as soon as I started telling leadership about that, they would kind of glaze over like, oh, this project is way more involved than I thought it was going to be. It's not just, I've worked with a lot of churches where they're used to going in and turning on the technology and then ignoring it for the rest of service. Just flip on the amp, like that's all they would do in terms of sound engineering. And in some regards, that's all they needed. But then when they got into the production side of things, they were like, oh, somebody's going to have to like pay attention the entire service. And then the complaint was, well, now they're not worshiping with us. It's like, well, if they're using their talents for this ministry, technically, like that it is. But I understood what they were getting at. And this is a rabbit hole in a sermon that I'm not going to get going on. But I've worked with a lot of people that have that complaint. So anyway, lighting, we're good there. I have 2-point lighting with a backwash, which is technically 3. I would love to get a hair light, but there's nowhere above me to hang it, so I would need a whole arm to invest in and hang it over my head. And then for what? For an outline, it would probably look nice, but I'm just not there yet. I might do that in the new studio. I think there needs to be one more light to separate the rack from the shadow. Well, honestly, oh, you mean light up the rack? I could just angle this kind of like that, and then that's a computer screen. So now everything is kind of out of the frame. That's fine. It's pretty close to the VR tower that's standing right behind me, but there you go. That's a nice cleaned up look. Also, well, I'll talk about that in a second. So the next element that I like to focus on is sound. So I want to be sure that I am clearly being heard. The way that this part hasn't really changed much, other than the fact that I'm back to the RE20, which is a microphone I invested in back in the Bird Dog days and have never wanted to get away. Now, I had one of these arms. They're Gatorwork arms. They were quite popular for a while. What I love about the Gatorwork arm is that the XLR cable is integrated with the actual unit. So when I first started out, I had an XLR that was wrapped around an arm, and it was not quite as elegant. It works really well, and then the cable on the other side of it is like 10 feet long. So then it runs all the way around into my amp, my processor, basically. So I have a vocal processor. It is preamp processor by DBX, the 286S. Works really well. It shows me my audio levels via visual lighting, so I know that I'm getting sound even without, like, I need to look and see. And then I also have compression on this, and so there is lights that show me the compression. If I scream or yell, it should pull that down a fair bit. And then the output lights, which are not actually lit up on this, then give me an indication if I'm clipping or anything on the way out. But it allows me to compensate for any processing decibel loss that I'm doing on that rack. So I have an output gain, and then out of there goes into my UMC 1820, which, I've talked about it ad nauseum. I've had various versions of it. This one was the full rack version, and so it's a beaut. I've had a few issues with it recently, but it works really well as an audio interface back into my computer, because for training videos, or when we actually do record, so sometimes we do, audio recordings through, I was using Audacity, but then I kind of upgraded to of course, now it's Ableton. So I started using Ableton, and we were recording tracks and doing some things recently, early this year. So that was fun to have kind of the little mini studio set up here. I'm going to be doing more of that, I hope, when the garage gets built and my office gets built. We're going to do a little sound recording booth in there too. So that will be fun. And I'm hoping to have video options to like record people, singing. So that would be great. Anyways, so I switched over to Ableton. Well, that gives me then, I think 8 or 12 literal inputs that I can use for microphones. And there's a recent update for the 1820 that lets you do individuals. It used to be pairs, left, right. So it used to be channels 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and so on. Now you can do inputs 1 or input 2, which makes the most sense because you buy an 8-channel USB enabled rack so that you can have 8 channels and not 4. So that's what that's what I'm using that for now. And then I bring this into back into my computer, which then goes over to my X32 core, which is a single 1U rack mount, and that goes then over to my I have a digital soundboard then that all those channels come into, and I can manipulate and carry on. And then out of there go my outputs, and that's where this output goes to vMix. So it sounds like a lot, but really it's like processing for this beautiful microphone. Okay, so the microphone to the arm, to the processor, to the USB input, then into the soundboard, and then back to vMix. So it's only like 4 steps, but if you're not used to digital routing, that might sound like a lot or very confusing. I promise you it makes sense in my head, but there we go. We like the framing now of the picture. That's good. Yes, that's way better. The RE20 sounds great, but it can definitely get bottom heavy when I'm watching in the living room. Big tower speakers and a subwoofer. Yeah, and if I drive my bass voice down there, I can understand. Now there is on this channel, so if I pull open, you can't see this, but that RE20 I used to have. Oh yeah, the low cut is on this, and so the low cut starts at 92 hertz, and most speaking microphones you're going to start at around like 120, 150, something like that. But also the register of my voice, I think 90 hertz is probably enough because there's not really a whole lot of data. But yes, if you put me on the TV in the living room and then you turn on your massive subwoofer, which I have an 18-inch subwoofer sitting here in my theater, totally not necessary. It can get a little rumbly. So I understand your concern. But on the actual, I could roll that high pass. The problem on my phone is if I roll that thing up to like 150, then it sounds kind of tinny on my phone. So that's one of those things about doing live streaming where you have to decide, all right, what standard am I going for? Am I going for a television? Am I going for a phone? Am I going for an iPad? They're all different style, like a tablet. They're all different styles of speakers, and everybody says, I just want to sound good on everything. It's like, nah, that doesn't really work because you're basically saying Angus's multi-$1,000 sound system over my $400 iPhone. We're not going to have the same sound. I'm sorry. That's just not how that's going to work. And people tend to understand that. They just, they just have to think about it or be told. Yeah, think about that, right? Like your little phone speakers or a theater, it's going to sound different. And that's actually a conversation we've had to have at Safe Harbor is like, how are people watching this on a Sunday morning? Are they casting it to their TV or are they watching it on their device? And then we tailor our sound to accommodate that sort of thing. So that's the whole sound rig. RE20 through XLR GatorWorks arm. It is a unified, the cable goes into the arm and then it goes down through the actual mount. One thing about this GatorWorks arm is it comes loose on the table. It has a clamp that like screws down to the table. But if you move it a lot, especially if you lock, so there's a dial on the back. If you lock that and it tightens up the arm, it tends to wiggle itself off your table, and then you'll be mid-show and you'll do this, and the whole thing will pop off, and that's awkward. So, a couple of like room for improvement there, especially on a smooth desk. I didn't have it so much happen. Oh no, it happened quite a bit at Bird Dog, I guess, but most tables are smooth, and so opposed to just hard mounting it and like drilling a hole through my table and then that being that, I do like the fact that I can move it around because this studio might change and I might want it on the other side of the desk at some point. So it is nice to have that flexibility, but you just got to be conscious of when you move it, make sure that the actual clamp doesn't move. So through the GatorWorks over to a preamp processor, which is the DBX 286S. Great little single channel processor, gives you compression, gives you a preamp, makes it really straightforward to use. And then out of that output into my UMC 1820, which is a 1U rack mounted Behringer preamp. And I send other microphones there directly there, but this one gets a little extra processing. And then out of that USB into my X32 core, routed back to my X32 core through USB, and then that gets outputted then for vMix. So then I have that individual channel mix, and I can see that mix happening here. I actually have a mix bus that is microphone only, and then that gives me the option to send that wherever I want. So if I'm using StreamYard, if I'm using vMix, if I'm using whatever service, I can just say mix bus 2, and I know that is all of this processing coming out of that one. I never have to like change drivers or do whatever. Interesting factoid before I move on to video and jump back to the chat real quick with Angus. Interesting thing about that is I updated the driver recently. It gave me some additional features, but I have found that when my computer goes to sleep and then wakes up again, I lose this microphone. It's the preamps working, the 1820 is working, but somewhere between the 1820 and the soundboard, the X32 core, they stop communicating. And I have to reboot the computer, not just sign out and sign back in. I have to go through an entire restart. Now it's all SSD, so it's 20 seconds, but I have to restart the whole computer to get this to talk correctly. So that's annoying because that's a new symptom. I didn't have to do that before, and now I do. So it's really annoying. All right, over to the chat real quick. I recorded a video recently with indigenous singers and drums seated in around a very large drum. There were dancers moving around between the drummers and the cameras, who were all wearing bells that needed to be heard along with the drum. So I decided to go simple. My AT-BP 4025 up high above our central camera. No EQ whatsoever. Tiny bit of limiting to control dynamics. Just a touch. I mixed it to sound good on a very large Mayer array in a 1,500 seat theater. It sounded good, but definitely a touch thin on smaller speakers. But in the theatrical space, it sounded great. So you were using the microphones, like you were using the microphones to amplify the sound in the theater, or you were just using the mics to record. It sounds like you were using them for both purposes. But yes, depends on how you mix it too, right? So this is kind of a sidebar. But I've always there's two approaches to sound. The old school way that we used to do it was we would mix the house, and then we would go to the production, recording or whatever, and then we would change that auxiliary or whatever to sound good there. In recent days, I have gone the other way because we have multiple places it's recording to, and you probably do this too, I guess. But in recent days, in the last 15 years, I mix to headphones and I make sure that sounds amazing, because then I can just send that to the stream, right? And so if the headphones sound good, I know I'm pretty much getting like 90% of the way there with the stream. So I mix to there, and then I take them off and I do the house sound and I adjust just the house. And it's a flip. I mean, it used to be the other way around where we would do live sound, but this gives you the option then to send that headphone mix back to the monitors if you want, and then make minor adjustments to the monitors. But at least you start with the bass line. Everything sounds good. All the mixes are going to sound like this. And then I'm going to make minor adjustments for the various outputs. So you have a room sound, you have a monitor sound, and then, hopefully your production sounds good. But I suspect that's what you were doing, is you were using the microphones for the house sound and for your stream. And you had to compensate on one or the other. So if it sounded a little thin on the stream, but it sounded great. It was a pre-record for playback during a convocation ceremony. I wanted to sound good because we had like something like 16 shows to do. My goodness. Yeah, that's a lot of work. Hey, by the way, today's show is not sponsored by Starbucks coffee today. Don't tell Tim Hortons. Oh, and one sad sidebar I will make is I tried to get to a Tim Hortons on my trip to Ohio because there are lots of them in Ohio. And we were unfortunately traveling through the evening, and they all closed at 8 o'clock. And so we didn't actually get a chance to hit one up on the way there. And then when we left, we drove through the night. So I missed an opportunity. So I will be going back the end of the month. And you better believe that I'm going to be finding a Tim Hortons on my drive through Ohio, through Michigan, through Ontario. They're gonna get my patronage. That's for sure. Anyway, Chad says, yeah, I prefer to mix for broadcast first, then make pre-EQ, crossover, fill adjustments for the room second. Yeah, that's where I'm at now when I'm doing sound. I did a wedding recently, and we recorded it, and I had done it backwards and regretted it. Everything went fine. There was no issue. But I was just taken back to my 15 years ago when I used to do house sound first. The problem was that we didn't really do a true sound check where I ran it. If I'm going to do a band or I'm going to do vocalists, if we're doing a cappella, whatever we're doing, I'm going to require that I have 30 minutes to run the sound check and make sure everything is correct. But in this instance, it was the dress rehearsal, the bride was in charge, and I was just there to kind of catch it and make sure that it's working. And I didn't want to take over. I probably should have for 15 minutes, but I mixed the house, and then I went to the mix and was like, all right, what am I getting? And that was a bit of a challenge post. Now, I have the tools at my disposal to make some changes. I actually had 4 audio recordings from various microphones and from microphones, video, a bunch of things. So I could compensate. Like when the groom talked, he was mic'd, but when the bride talked, she sounded a little muffled. So I was able to pull from other microphones. So anyway, it was fine. Everything was fine. But if I had done it, and if I was in charge of it, you know what I mean? Like if they're like, all right, sound guy, what do you need? But that just wasn't in the cards. So no biggie. The wedding went great. They got married, and now they have a video. And I did that kind of pro bono because you should have a video because you're not going to remember anything about your own wedding day. So there you go. So the audio worked out pretty well. Let me just make sure. Yeah, okay, I'm good in the chat. All right, so the last piece is video, and this I've been experimenting with a little bit. To start, the camera. I have a Canon RP, and the reason why I bought the RP is because it has the ability to go into my computer via USB. Now, I don't actually use that function anymore, which makes this camera a little bit pointless because in terms of why I bought it. Now, it's a beautiful mirrorless Canon camera. I take pictures with it. I take it on vacation. I do have a giant battery that sits on the back of it that powers through a D-tap, powers the camera, and it powers a little confidence monitor that I have above it, which shows me vector scopes and waveforms and all sorts of things. So I have a monitor that allows me to see the image and gives me the colors, all the information I need for coloration. But also that camera is mounted on a confidence monitor, and it's just a cheap little confidence monitor. I had an NDI one when I was at Bird Dog, but I bought a little confidence monitor that I can use, and on that monitor screen, that screen is plugged into the computer that's generating all my NDI sources, and on that screen is my vMix output flipped, right? Because it's bouncing off a mirror, so everything has to be flipped. So inside Studio Monitor, you can say show it in reverse, and it will show my picture in reverse, which then looks correct. So all that to say, it's a great way to make sure that I'm framed correctly, that my microphone is not necessarily like in front of my mouth, but I'm able to line myself up correctly. That you can see, I can see what you're seeing, but also then if I share a screen or something like that, I can be sure to be talking to you while that's happening. And so I've trained myself over the years to talk to my own picture. People are like, oh, I don't like looking at myself, but I actually find it incredibly useful because I know right behind this eyeball is the lens I can actually see a little reflection of the lens back there. And so if I'm looking at my face, I know that I'm looking into the lens and I'm looking into you. So that is a very convenient way to train yourself to talk and do training videos. That's one of the things that I use, primarily things that I use the studio for right now, is training videos. Now, I also got into the habit when we were at the soundstage using a function called peaking. And so the little monitor that's above my confidence monitor does peaking, and it shows an outline of everything that's in focus. And so I know that the camera's in focus. I don't have to guess. I'm actually getting data back from the camera showing what is actually in focus. And so if I put my hand out in front, the peaking goes around. It's a blue outline. The peaking goes around my hand. And then if I move my hand away, the camera should readjust. And now I can see my Vandelay symbol is very much so in focus. It has a blue outline around that. My microphone arm, this cable is outlined in blue. So I'm in focus again. Peaking, if you don't know what that is, I strongly recommend you look into it and you find a little cheap monitor. That one's like $65 or $70. It might even be on sale with Prime right now. That allows you to turn peaking on, because then you know, especially if you're making manual adjustments, then you know without a shadow of a doubt that you are in focus. Monitors can be blurry, coloration can be off, all these things can be wrong. So why not turn on a function that then shows you and guarantees you that things are in focus? And we used to guess with the other cameras we had DSLRs at the soundstage for a while. We used to guess when we were in focus. No longer. We don't guess. We only go based off of the data that we're given. And so I can tell where my whites and blacks levels are because I get that data back on the confidence monitor. I can tell where I am in focus because I get that data back on the confidence monitor. So those little monitors, they're great to have like a little extra screen that's bigger, but really I love it for getting vector scopes, getting peaking, getting all that information that otherwise you don't get. You don't get that on a confidence monitor like this out of studio monitor. It would be great if they did peaking. Maybe they do. I don't know. I haven't looked at that recently, but it's way better. Your productions are way better when you learn to read the actual coloration data, and you can turn on peaking on your monitors, and then you know without a doubt what is in focus. So when I'm training camera guys now at the soundstage, I'm just like, so we use red because I don't know why, but red is easy to see on multiple backgrounds. So we use red, and I tell them, okay, the minister's glasses, the bridge of his glasses, make sure that the red line is on his glasses. Because as viewers of people talking, we tend to actually look at their eyes, even though we know that they're not looking at us in particular. But making eye contact with the person talking, that's generally where we look. And so if we make sure that the bridge of his glasses or the whites of his eyes, so the printer kicked on, or the whites of his eyes have a little fleck of red peeking on them, we know for sure that that stuff is in focus. Well, that printer's louder than I thought it was. Anyway, so when I'm training my camera guys, I say make sure that the peaking shows up on the red of his glasses, and then we know that his face is basically in focus. Now, the same thing then goes for when you're presenting. You want to be sure that your face is in focus, or that your subject is in focus, and that you're looking into the lens of the camera, because if you're not, people are generally watching your video and looking at you and kind of reading your face and interacting with you on a video, if you can, by watching your eyes. There's a guy that says you can tell what people are up to by merely looking at where their eyes are looking, because their eyes are pointing at the thing that's important. And so if they're looking at you, they want to present something to you. They want you to, connect with whatever it is that they're saying. And so although it's awkward for a lot of people to see themselves on camera and then to talk to themselves, essentially, it helps greatly when it comes to recording videos, training, exercises, all that stuff. Because I used to do a side shot. I used to be like this and talk to you guys like this. Well, this is fine. I actually like the way that this looks, but it feels impersonal. Like it feels like I'm not really talking to you. I'm talking to somebody else and you're listening in. But if you're watching a video and I'm talking like this and you're watching it, then it feels like I'm actually talking to you, which is something that great interviewers and great presenters, trainers. There's a guy named Lon.tv. He does all sorts of reviews and whatever. He talks into the camera. He does a great job. I think his stuff is very engaging just because he's trained himself to talk directly to the camera, and that's the way that it looks. So video-wise, I've got a Canon RP. I've got a confidence monitor. I've got an additional monitor up top. It's all run off of a giant 99-watt battery. All of that information now, thanks to Balu, shout out to CC over at Bird Dog, Balu gave me a capture card that captures HDMI. And so it allows me to then send two sources, one camera, and the other one is actually my Blackmagic source. And that's cam 2. Here it is right here. So the other source is this one. And this is just showing Cloud Dock, which is a tutorial that we did a little while ago, but it's showing the usage of my Cloud Dock. I'm obviously not using very much space on these hard drives, but the beautiful thing here is that I can pull this up. I can see it at any time. I can also make, that's actually an NDI source. So what's going on here is I am bringing these two sources into a program called New Tech Connect, which is a way of selecting two USB, all right, USB webcams and turning them into NDI. So my camera goes HDMI out of the confidence monitor above the camera, HDMI full 1080p into that capture card that Balu gave me. And then out of that capture card, it turns it into a USB webcam. That goes into New Tech Connect, and that gets converted then into NDI, and then I can send that anywhere in my house. So that's pretty cool, along with this picture. So this camera and that Blackmagic Cloud Dock, the HDMI out of there, both go into that capture card. That gets converted into webcams, and then those webcams get converted into NDI. So really simple stuff, and really great little process to where then I can take those NDI sources and bring them across to this computer and integrate them in with vMix, and vMix can then use them as sources. So that is how the sources get into vMix on my network. I have multiple computers to make this production work. What I love is my old vMix machine, basically its primary job with its dual GPUs, its primary job is just to generate NDI 265. And so I can use NVENC to do that and use the GPU power and not the CPU power, because the CPU is just an i7, but I got these dual 970s in there, and it's no sweat for them to generate these 265 sources, and then those 265 sources come onto my network as NDI sources, and I can pull them down. Oh yeah, and they come into my NDI source as like they're HX3, I think, and so they're not even bandwidth heavy. So although that computer has fiber optics running to it, it's using like 10 gigs or 10 megs. So yeah, there's nothing to it. It's awesome. Do it by putting nothing on your main left and right feed, and feed the house from streams from matrices instead of processing it there. Yes, this is a great suggestion. Back to sound real quick. That's the way that I've done it. I stopped doing mains left and right as my main send. And actually, that's the way that it's configured on my X32 as well here in the house, is everything's matrices, or on X32, it is, what's it called? Buses. They're all buses. And so I use, I can pull this up here to be accurate, but I use bus 2 for my microphone. I use bus 1 for everything on my, all sound generation except my microphone, right? So if I am wanting to listen to a StreamYard, I select bus 1, and that's my I'm sorry. If I want to listen to it, yes, I select bus 1, and that's everything but my microphone. And then I use bus 2 as my input for my microphone. So that's only a microphone. Bus 3 is the entire mix, including my microphone, minus the browser, right? So in an instance where I'm using this setup in StreamYard, I don't want my microphone to be inputted twice. I just want it to go once. So I use microphone only bus 2, and then to listen to the I'm sorry, it's mix minus browser is what it is, like web browser. And then I have a music only, which is like Spotify, iTunes, but nobody uses iTunes. And anything that's generating music goes through Mixbus 3. Mixbus 4, and that then is an easy way for me to isolate just music. So if I want to turn Spotify up, but I don't want the overall sound of my speakers to increase, I can just manipulate that one program, and that's all routed through the computer. All right, back to this real quick. Years ago, we used Sony fixed lenses XD cameras. They had peaking on their viewfinders and LCDs, but it was too forgiving. Our camera operators would believe that they were in focus, and they were still a little off. It was very frustrating. A handy thing I keep in mind when setting up a picture-in-picture for a presenter with a slideshow, always have them look towards the slides. So you mean on camera. So if you put your slides in this corner, then have them looking like this. Or if you're doing like an even, like a 4x3, but you're doing left and right, so one on the other, not full screen, then yes, if they're looking across, don't have them looking away from their slides, always have them looking into it. That's a great practice. And it does appeal a little bit better to people watching it, that's for sure. I usually build myself presets for people looking in both directions, just in case. See, there's a guy that's been burned a few times, and now he has it all built in. That's the way to do it. Hey, man. Hey, Jeremy. Just had to stop by and say, hey, too busy to hang out, though. Oh, that's a good problem to have. Hey, how was the Peplet trip usage? I should do a review on that because I do have some discoveries on that. So maybe I'll do a show, and then you'll get the full lowdown. But it was overall very good, very successful. At Angus, hey, how did you get a crown? At Jeremy, YouTube decided to gamify chat. Oh, yeah. You get points for interacting. It's true. You do get points for interacting. And I think this one.
How neat is that?
It is pretty neat. Hey, game on. Yep, you gotta compete against Angus because they've been busy in the chat. Just by commenting a lot, YouTube seems to be trying to gamify the comment section. Yes, they are. On the plus side, hey, you're in the top 4. That was not too hard. But yes, let's see. Is there a way to actually see? Yep. Hey, Jeremy, yeah, you're in the top 4. You could probably beat Bugzeek at this point because he had to leave. So, but welcome to the gamification of the chat, whatever that means. My typical setup will either be a panel discussion or someone speaking from a lectern. Sometimes I have to switch picture-in-picture presets mid-show. Yeah, because especially if you have screens on either side, so like a typical auditorium is going to have screens on left and right so that your audience, regardless of where they're sitting in the audience, is going to have an easy way to look at it. If you're sitting on the left side and the screen's way over on the right, then it's a pain to kind of squint and see what their slides are. The previous place that I was running tech for in Michigan, we had projectors on both the left and the rights of the auditorium, and it was fine. But then you ended up having to, make sure that whichever way the guy was talking, that the slides show up correctly. And it does throw it, especially if your technicians are not very quick with knowing that sort of information or being paying attention. The pastor that was at that church would constantly pace the stage, and so we would always have a wide shot, and then we would have this kind of up close shot when he'd get back to the pulpit, but he'd like to wander a fair bit, and we would follow him. We had Bird Dog P200s. We would follow him fairly well, but then after a while I think they got tired of trying to keep up with him, and so they would just switch to a wide shot, which was a totally different camera. It was a JVC over a Bird Dog Mini. And it looked okay, but it was definitely different than the P200. So they should have invested in another P200. Well, I won't be able to last too long. Well, that's okay. You'll just have to catch up. You can dump a bunch of stuff in the chat. I don't know if Nightbot will kick you off, though, if you start spamming. But we'll see. Anyways, always it was a great little sidebar. Thanks for bringing that up about how we do that. The only other thing about video then is the presenting piece that I want to kind of talk briefly on about how I do that here. Now, typically I'll use Scan Converter HX because I'm not really too concerned about bitrate quality and whatever. And quite frankly, the compromise, I think at this point is fairly minimal. And so I'll use Scan Converter HX or Screen Capture HX, which is an NDI tool, and I'll bring that into vMix directly. And I just actually have an input 13, that is just desktop capture. Well, because I'm using two computers, I can actually have a computer that's a presenter. So my old vMix machine is running is doing all the NDI generation and capture, right? And so on screen 1, that is my confidence monitor, where Studio Monitor is running full screen, flipped because it's on a mirror. And on screen 2, then I have an additional Dell monitor that's above my fleet of 3 surround sound screens here, which are higher hertz rate. But I just have a 1080p 60 Dell monitor, and on there is monitor 2 from the old machine. So now I can run scan converter or screen capture or whatever they call it, HX, on that machine and send it across via NDI, capturing whatever it is that I want to do there. So you've actually already seen this once today to begin with, but I can then pull up pictures or do whatever that will allow you to see something that I'm presenting without having to show you all of the mess that's going on these 3 screens. So I got vMix here. I have a browser open here. I've got 2 more browsers open there. You can see YouTube Studio is open here. I've got the vMix socials next to it. Over here, I've got things like Amazon and Amazon Photos and whatever else that I need running to keep, some show notes, a few things like that. And then on this screen, I've got vMix. So I'm using the real estate of 4 monitors to pull this off, but it's very convenient because I basically have a presenter. I have a presenter monitor that is what you're seeing here. Now, this is my old F-150. This one was in an accident. I missed this truck because I had lower miles than the one that I currently have, but it also didn't have many of the features that my new one does. And there is that kayak that I was telling you about that I might be taking. Now, that is the old rack mounting option that I've got for my truck. So what you do there is you run see these bars, you run a ratchet strap. I've changed all these ratchet straps. You run a ratchet strap basically through the door, both doors, and then you cinch it down as hard as you can. And then what that does is it pulls this down onto the roof, and then you tie off your kayak to that actual roof rack. And it's got these nice little foam inserts. They work pretty well. And this I've actually taken on multiple trips to Northern Ontario for multiple hours. Driving for multiple hours. It's probably like 8 or 10 hours, and it rides fine. However, when you get over 70 miles an hour, which is pretty common in Michigan, it whistles, it sings. And partially due to the fact that there are these ropes that go through the bars, and so they're pulled tight, and then when wind goes over the edge, it vibrates that strap, and so it like sings as you go down the highway. And then it doesn't help that it kind of opens the doors a little bit by pulling those seals, and so then the wind and whatever it's making this noise, but then the doors are kind of open, and so it's pretty noisy inside the truck. So I've bought a different rack system, but that is the screen capture option when it comes to being able to use the machine. Now, when I was at Bird Dog, a friend of mine, my final boss that I had there, he purchased me personally a keyboard and mouse from Logitech that allows me to switch between computers because I've got 3 different machines that are running here. And so I was able to, I'm able to jump between computers pretty quick. And let me pull up another photo here. So I'm able to jump between computers pretty fast by pressing the button at the bottom. And I'm rubbing off the numbers, and the pads on this and everything are getting very slick because I use this stuff every single day. But I couldn't, I'd recommend it. I am also losing some letters on the keyboard, which is funny. I lose the same 3 letters, A, D, and E. I lose on a keyboard, on every keyboard I use. On the Bird Dog laptop that I had, that I gave back when I left, I had those 3 letters were rubbed off. On this keyboard, those letters are now rubbing off. And I'm like, what am I typing? Maybe those are the 3 most common letters I type, but like, what am I typing? I can see the LEDs underneath. I've rubbed the letters off so much. But anyways, so yeah, this keyboard and mouse has been amazing, has been great, but it allows me to jump between 3 computers just by pressing a button. It lets me switch over. So I you can see my mouse here. But I usually take this kayak up to Northern Ontario, and I'm tempted to take it this year. However, some guys aren't coming, and so we're going to need more people for canoes, and so it might be a long way to haul it just for the sake of having it. But man, this kayak is a 16.5-foot kayak. It's a Tsunami by Wilderness, and it is a beaut. She paddles so nice. I love it. And so it's it's great. It's great. So yeah, that's me out on a lake in northern Ontario, and that is she's a beaut. Hey, +1 for man cameras. It's true. Need an over the back shoulder shot to show your desk. It's true. That's a good idea. Sir, that camelback strap is not a ratchet strap. Yes, that's why I said I've replaced them. I use ratchets now, not this little cam buckle thing that I have. They showed up with that rack, and I was like, yeah, that's not going to cut it. So I use 500-pound ratchet straps now. That will do the job. But yes, maybe this is a great suggestion. You have to put a little twist in the strap to eliminate the singing. Yeah, that's a good idea. I would not travel 10 hours one way with a kayak on the roof with one of those little buckles. That photo that was there before, that was the first day I got those straps, and I think I went to the park down the road and went out for the afternoon. But it is a beautiful place that I get to go to every year. It's a long way from Tennessee. And people are like, wow, you like, why not just go camping? And it's part of it is like the guys, the people, the trip itself. I really like driving, and so it's not really a problem for me. But I thought I had photos in here. I actually like the Wilderness so much, and my wife is so small. She's a very petite lady that I ended up buying her a Wilderness kayak, but it is the 12.5-footer. And so this is more like a day kayak. Mine's a touring kayak. Hers is technically a touring. It's a Tsunami. It's technically a touring, but she fits into this weight category, which is for paddlers under like 120 pounds. So she sits just fine in this thing. I will probably, the next kayak I buy will probably be another 16.5-footer for her, and my kids will get 12.5-footers for their next upcoming teenage years. But I bought the yellow one first. I got it for a song, man. Like I found a guy that was moving to Colorado and he couldn't take it with him, so I bought it from him. I've had it for several years, and then I found that my wife's kayak downriver, if you know what that means, in Michigan. I found it in Monroe, and somebody was selling it for, again, a few $100, and I was like, I will take it. All it really needed was a good wash. I brought it home and I power washed it, and it looks amazing. So big fan of that. Big fan of kayaking. It's so easy compared to canoeing. It is so easy to kayak. So here I am. This is the cutoff before I go camping on that beautiful blue truck I owned. This is the cutoff, and you can see there. So I've got a lead line. Let me see here. Yeah. So I've got a lead line. Why isn't the mouse working? And then these are actually ratchet straps that go through here. Those are those 500-pound ratchet straps. I've got a lead line, and there's one on the back as well that ties down the back bumper, so keep it pointed into the wind. But as you can see, this style of rack only fits one kayak, so that's not gonna work now that my wife has one as well. And I'm planning on getting more kayaks. I'll end up probably having to get a trailer if I really want to use all of them. But baby steps, baby steps. They're hanging in my garage right now, which is pretty cool. I'm just trying to think. I had some shots. My friend took a few shots of me fishing. I think I showed this one, right? The kayak itself is humongous. Like, it's 16.5 feet is it's a big boat. But I can fish out of it. I've kind of customized it a little bit to have some Scotty mounts, so I can fish out of it. I have a little kayaking net there, a little bilge pump there, all my camera equipment and everything. Like, I would take this camera with me sometimes because I have a nice big lens. Oh, right here. I have a nice 70 to 200 lens, and I like to take this guy up there to do shots of like wildlife and whatever. I also have a ultra wide lens that I do night photography with. So this was several years ago, back in 2018. But yeah, it's a good little, it's a great kayak. And it's kind of a shame if I don't take it, because this is the trip to really use it on. But yeah, we're just going to need guys to go paddling this year. So if I don't bring it, I don't even know if I'm going to get out this year. I probably should make a plan to go paddling with my wife. Go on a date, go paddling. But the other issue in Tennessee is there's not a lot of bodies of water. Whereas in Ontario and Michigan, there's water everywhere. And most of it's owned by the government, so you can go on it. Currently up in Michigan, I took my kids to Mackinac Island. My sons wanted to kayak around the island. We biked instead. Seen some cool rigs for the small harbor freight trailer. Ooh, maybe I should look into that. I do need to figure out a four canoe, 4 kayak option, because we're going to need something. Issue is like, where do I store that thing when I'm not using it most of the year, right? I'm tempted to buy one, but I'm also like, I use my kayak so little that I don't know if it makes any sense to get one. Anyways, it's 11:15, so we should probably get on with life. My brother is probably wondering where I am. And yeah, we've got some things planned to do today. So I also have to work at some point. So we will get Sunday's production ready to go today. But yeah, that's the current studio. Lighting, sound, and video, and presentation as kind of a sidebar there. But everything, the whole back end of things is run via NDI. The things that are not NDI are the cameras. So cameras, I use capture cards, then we use scan converter. You know, with the final step. So I use Discovery Server. I didn't even mention that. But to manage the NDI sources, I use Discovery Server because I have multiple networks connected to the same machines. So I tell it, like, this is where the Discovery Server is, and then it sends all that stuff there, and it seems to work pretty well. I have 2 separate networks. I do have the ability, mind you, to run NDI webcam on my phone. So if I didn't want to, for example, I could connect to that Wi-Fi network, the NDI network, which is just a closed network, doesn't have any internet connected to it or anything like that. But I can connect to that NDI network, and then there I am. And then I can open up the NDI app, camera app, HX camera, and there I am. Now I could switch this over, and then I could add a source to the show. So let's go ahead and input. Whoops. Add input. Where are we here? This is the final little piece here, but add a little NDI source. Looking around, NDI HX camera. I'll put this here on my desk. There it is. And now we could switch over. Oh, I'm hearing double. Let's go ahead and mute that microphone. But there I am. And now we can kind of get a view of the messy room that I'm in. But here's that rig, all those cameras. And I really like the fact that this just works really well. You know, like, it's pretty quick. I just connect it over. Now we're 1080p. Here we go, 480 at 24 frames. That looks terrible. 4K at 30. Nah, that's okay, but not super clean. 1080 at 30. I think I like that the most. And yeah, I could mount this somewhere, I guess, and have a secondary shot. But yeah, it's nice to have that little HX Wi-Fi network that allows you to just throw a camera on. I could go for a walk now through the house and keep you all with me, and you could see all that. But obviously the coloration looks a fair bit different than what the other camera looks like. But hey, in a pinch, if you need another camera, it's easy peasy. And I just pulled that up and added that source to vMix right now. Like, it's not something that I normally have in my rig. But if it's like, hey, I need to do a quick overhead shot, or I want a second camera angle, or this camera dies, I could add that HX, boom, put it up there, and off we go. We could keep going. So it's a nice way to have a little backup camera if needed. Always a pleasure. Absolutely, Angus. Thank you for coming along. And I think you're winning at the top fan. So well done. Hey, that's great. I saw an amazing 4 kayak rack on the back of an RV, but that also requires an RV. Yeah, I don't have that. I don't know if I want that because I hear RVs are just also come like regular expenses, just like boats. My grandfather-in-law says boat stands for break out another 1,000, which I believe because he has a boat and it's constantly needing something done. So there you go. I just realized that my overlay is not running, probably because, we'll switch over here real quick, probably because I turned it off to do training videos. So now we'll see if it shows up. It has like a 10-second delay. And I wonder too, there it is. So there's my little logo. But yes, it's time to go. So thank you so much for hanging out with me, everybody. Always appreciate you spending some time. We'll be back next week. I'll figure out what it is that we're going to talk about. Probably do a review of that PepLink device and give you the ups and downs of that. And just kind of work through. I'll probably come up with something else as well, just because that probably won't last too long. But we'll hang out again. It's always good to see you. Always good to hear from you. Thanks for spending time with me today. And we'll catch you guys next week. Somewhere down the trail. Well, I got a couple more shows before I'm out again. But be well. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. And we will see you all in the next one. So take care, guys. Always a pleasure. Bye.
That's pretty neat.